Oh my God, it's just such an unbelievable moment.
Brandon, you also told me, as you can hear the chants from the crowd, let's go, Brandon.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I am Brandon Jones, also known as Universal Jones around these YouTube streets. On today's episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about this change in workplace culture, and also this new hyper focus on well-being that has taken place in workplaces and just in our lives in general. Now, stress is important. I talk about traumatic stress, I talk about trauma all the time, but stress management is something that I really think that we need to implement early on in children's lives, and as adults, we should be utilizing that as part of our personal development. We're coming up on the tail end of the year. A lot of people are going to start implementing, their New Year's resolutions and getting their bodies right and their personal development. One thing that I would encourage you to add to your regiment is something around dealing with stress or stress mastery. So many of our lives are just built around stress. Like we just keep going, going, and going, and it's uncomfortable, but it is a reality. And many of our lives are like this, what I'm going to share with you right now. Many of our lives are set up just like this. Now, many of you are familiar with this. Growing up, I am a geriatric millennial, and I spent a lot of my childhood playing this here very video game. This game is Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, Sonic the Hedgehog, little did I know growing up playing this game that this was going to be a metaphor for how many of us live our lives, but it definitely is. Now, think about it. You're Sonic. The stage or the level that you're on is your work week or your week in general. And if you remember, the kind of crux of this game is to go from one end, the start, to the other end, the finish, and go through the stage. And throughout this, you want to grab as many different gold rings as you can, right? Those are your little moments of joy throughout your week. Now, there's booby traps, and there are shortcuts and ways for you to get to where you need to be. There's also little creatures that are trying to bring you down. Those may be your haters or the people who draw all your energy, right? Sometimes you do this with a partner, sometimes you don't. That could be tails. And your goal is usually to get to checkpoints, which is pretty much like your day to day. Get to your checkpoint so you can rest up, or before you die, you can save your space, and then you can keep on moving on. That's how many of us live our week to week, is like a game of Sonic the Hedgehog. And once you get to the end of the stage, ultimately that's the end of your week. You pass this level and you restart to go on to the next. And at some point in time in your life, you'll get to that final boss. But until then, you have fun bouncing, running, sliding, drilling through things throughout your week. And that's how we live our lives, like Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, it's interesting parallel that I make here because this is stressful. And many people really do need to implement stress mastery into their lives. Um, Now, stress mastery, some people are like, what is that? I don't even know what that means. What is stress mastery? Ultimately, it's just your ability to deal with the stressors that come in your life, being proactive with your well-being, being proactive with your self-care. All that is important. And many people don't even know where to start. And honestly, let me just be completely 100. A lot of people are just used to being stressed out. Their norm is stress. They seek stress. Their comfortability is with stress. We have to get beyond that. I think in order for us to continue to move forward as a society, maintaining that level of stress is not good for your health. It's not good for your physical and mental health. It's definitely not good for your spirit. It's not anything good for you to keep moving forward with this level of stress that you're going through. And I've met so many clients in my data in my when I was a practicing clinician who were dealing with so much stress. And now, as I'm in a management role and I run business and I work with leaders all around the country, really all around the world, I see people who are just living stressful lives all the time. And tough stuff happens, man. Like life happens, and sometimes you have to keep showing up and showing out, but you have to manage your stress to the best of your ability. One of the reasons why I disappeared from YouTube for a little bit was because I went through a divorce. It wasn't easy, very stressful. Very a lot of emotions, a lot of frustrations, and stuff still comes up. But at the end of the day, I was fortunate to head into this divorce that I went through, managing my stress to a point where I didn't let it get to me where I was immobile. And I see so many people, especially men, and I'm gonna definitely be talking about this more on the channel, who crash out when they get divorced. Men take their own lives, they take their families' lives. They quit their jobs, they just go into deep depression. I didn't want that to be myself, man. Even knowing the circumstance that took place that led to the divorce, it could have been a very easy thing for me to do was to crash out because I wasn't the one who wanted it. But I didn't. I didn't allow that. I knew that I had more purpose beyond what was happening in this world to not allow myself to crash out. And I went in with a very big mind, a very big mindset and mentality towards it. That doesn't mean I wasn't sad. That doesn't mean that things weren't frustrating and I didn't have my down moments. But ultimately, I didn't let it drown me and bring me down to a bad level. I'm not going to talk about worldview today, but I want to get to this. This is another part of this conversation. Our lives have shifted. Our lives have changed. We are in a different world. And we used to talk about work-life balance. And I don't believe that this is a concept that applies anymore. I think we need to focus on life sustainability and how do we stay sustainable within our lives, with really like a whole well-being focus. A lot of our life in our work world has blended, and I think it's going to continue to go that direction with AI, with the economy. I can't even speak. The gig economy, with boomers and Xers headed out of the workforce, millennials headed up into more management and control within the economic system, and we introduce Gen Z into the workforce. Please believe work-life balance is going to be a thing of the past. And we're already starting to see things like quiet quitting. We're already starting to see things like compassion fatigue and burnout and all these things that people are checking out of how we used to do things. We are in a different space and different world. And hopefully, if you want to be somebody who's successful and survives, you need to be thinking about what life's going to be like 10 years from now and applying it today. You can't be thinking about how things used to be and how it's messed up now. You have that mentality, you're going to drown in this new world. And part of this is because of stress, right? People don't know how to deal with this new world. And the pandemic just brought all types of crazy stress into our lives. And that's where we're at today. And that's why it's important to bring in stress mastery. Because what happened during the pandemic? Well, every element or people activity area was impacted. For those of you who are familiar with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., he talks about the 9 areas of people activity. Well, there's actually 10 areas if you look at the updated version. Now, Mr. Fuller's version was originally the 9 areas were economics, entertainment, education, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war. You have to add health into the areas of people activity, especially how we had this uh, detrimental impact around a healthcare scare. We'll just say that. I don't want to get kicked off YouTube for talking about it, but it had a global impact on all of us. So we can definitely say that health is a part of our people activity. It shifts the culture. And if you're familiar with this concept from Mr. Fuller, what he says is we have white supremacy or injustice in any one of these areas, then it impacts all the areas. And that is really what I'm trying to share with you here. It's not about racism and white supremacy. That's Mr. Fuller's thought process. I'm saying let's expand beyond that. If you have adversity, if you have challenges, if you have any type of dysfunction in the system, all these things are impacted. And we're starting to see this in our society. We're starting to see people crash out in all these areas and everything's impacted. So we have to pay attention and we can't just get stuck in racial idolatry. I'm going to talk more about that on the channel as well. It's beyond that now. It's beyond that. And now it's for you, the thinker, to start thinking and applying what you need to survive, what your children need to survive, whether you have them now or not. What level of influence? Who are those in your circle? How can they, get inspired and see what you're doing? How do you model a behavior of well-being? This is where we are going. This is what we need. What happened during the pandemic? We got new language, and language is the transmission of culture. And when we utilize language, it also impacts our mood and our emotions and our behaviors. And anytime you see a cultural shift, a societal shift like we did, a monumental one like the pandemic, we got new language. And this new language came with terms that, were somewhat contradictory at times, which didn't always have clear meanings, but what they did do was they impact us on an emotional level. So we heard remote working, distant learning, social distancing, sheltering in place, pandemics, personal protection equipment or PPE, variants, vaccines, booster shots. And my favorite term that's not on the list here is unprecedented times. Unprecedented times. Like, what are unprecedented times? What are precedented times? If we flip it, right? And it's important for us to understand that when language is introduced, culture starts to shift because language is one of the key transmissions of culture. And that's what happened. There's another thing that I think happened during the pandemic that's leading to this quote unquote mental health crisis that we're having and all the stress that's going on is that I believe that collectively as a society, we went through a state of grief. And a lot of times in the United States, we think about grief as just the death of someone. But it wasn't just the death of someone. People did die, yes, and we don't need to talk about what killed them or not. But what we do need to talk about is how we were all impacted by the loss. A lot of us lost access. Some of us lost the normal routine. Some of us lost the ability of choice or to choose things. Some of us lost connections, and many of us lost opportunities during the pandemic. And if you were a thinker and if you were managing yourself the way that you should be, you gain some opportunities, which we'll talk about later, because there's always opportunities. Never let a good tragedy go to waste. And ultimately, yes, people lost loved ones. So there's a lot of grief. And if you believe in the seven stages of grief and things like that, some of us are still in those cycles. Even though the pandemic has shut down, we're still in this kind of process and cycle. So there's a level of ambiguous loss that is taking place for many of us. And some of us aren't even aware that this has happened. So how can you deal with something that you're not aware of? You can't you can't fix what you don't face. And that's very important for us to keep in mind. Grief and ambiguous loss is a natural emotional response resulting in significant loss, and that's what we had during the pandemic. Like we have a lot to go, we have a lot to build on, and our well-being is important. And mastering your stress is a very important thing you can do. The last thing I'm going to share before I close out this video, because I'm really just teeing up a series of videos here, is this concept of languishing. Like this was a concept that went viral back in 2021. It was in a New York Times article, and the article was focusing on people who have nice, cushy, white collar jobs and how they're dealing with their stress, folks like myself. And what the article highlighted was this: languishing is a sense of stagnation and emptiness. It feels as if you're muddling through your days, looking at your life through a foggy windshield, and it might be the dominant emotion of 2021 from the New York Times. And what this article was highlighting is exactly what I'm talking about now. Many people are languishing. Many people aren't quite at the level of clinical depression, but they meet a lot of the criteria. That criteria is keeping them from doing the things that they truly want to do. It's keeping them from taking that opportunity, moving out of state, trying the new career, having children, speaking up for themselves, disconnecting from their family that is unhealthy. A lot of people are stuck and they're languishing in their mood and their emotion that's not getting them anywhere. They feel empty. Don't let that be you. It is time for personal growth. It is time to master your stress. It is time to be who you didn't think that you can become. And one of the big things that I've been focusing on lately is something called post-traumatic growth. It's time for you to move beyond the trauma that you've experienced and grow to something bigger and better, and be the best part of yourself. And understand that as you go through a healing journey, it is not about a destination. It's about the journey. It is about the journey. It's about the process that you take to get there. And when you're languishing, you're not making any progress on that process. You're not going nowhere. So keep rocking with this channel. I'm doing my best to share some content to help people just focus a little bit better and on some different things to become the best part of yourselves. We have to do something better than what we're doing today. Can't be out here crashing out like we're seeing so many people doing. Can't be out here blaming politics for all your problems. Like you have the locus of control to make the difference in your life today. What are you waiting for? With that, live life with purpose, on purpose, and be safe, be constructive, and be well. I'm Brandon Jones, and I'll see you in the next episode. Peace.
Oh my God, it's just such an unbelievable moment.
Brandon, you also told